The planet Zenter 4 was in chaos. The air crackled with the tension of war as the sky burned red with explosions. The Zorathian forces, ruthless invaders, had descended upon the peaceful world, bringing death and destruction with every step. Their fleet hovered above, casting shadows over the broken landscapes below. The battle was fierce, and the people of Zenter 4 fought desperately to protect their homes and their future. In the midst of the chaos, a lone starship zoomed through the war-torn skies. The ship was sleek, silver, and brimming with power. It was the flagship of the Aloxian fleet, led by Captain Myra, a woman known across the galaxy for her unmatched leadership and her unwavering commitment to her people. Myra's heart beat with the rhythm of the battle as she gave orders, guiding her crew through the storm of gunfire and enemy missiles. Inside the command center of the ship, Myra stood tall, her sharp eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. Her uniform, dark blue with silver markings, fit perfectly, and her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes glowed with a fierce determination as she spoke, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Bring the weapons online, fire at will," Myra commanded, her voice cutting through the hum of the ship's systems. Her crew responded with precision, firing the ship's powerful weapons at the incoming Zorathian forces. The explosions rocked the battlefield, but the Zorathians retaliated with equal force. Myra's thoughts, though focused on the battle, were always with her crew. She had trained them for this moment, but even she couldn't predict the outcome. The stakes were high, and every decision she made could mean the difference between life and death. As the battle raged on, Myra's sensors picked up a distress signal. It was coming from a human soldier, one who had been caught in the crossfire of the Zorathian assault. Myra's heart skipped a beat. She had always believed that the humans were a threat to the galaxy, but now, in the heat of battle, she realized that their fate might be linked. "Signal the medbay, prepare for a rescue mission," Myra ordered. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Herc, turned to her with a look of disbelief. "Captain, are you sure? The Zorathians will have their sights on him. It's too dangerous." Myra's eyes narrowed. "I'll take responsibility. We're saving him." "He's human, yes, but he's still someone in need. Get the shuttle ready." The crew exchanged looks, but none dared to question their captain. Myra had earned their loyalty long ago, and when she made a decision, they followed without hesitation. Myra boarded the shuttle herself, knowing that she had to be the one to go. She trusted her crew with everything, but this was personal. The shuttle cut through the sky, moving toward the coordinates of the distress signal. Myra's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of her decision heavy on her mind. As she neared the location, the shuttle jolted with enemy fire. The Zorathians had detected her, and they weren't about to let her make this rescue. Myra gritted her teeth and powered through, her hand steady on the controls. She could hear the roar of enemy ships outside, but she focused on her mission. There below her, she saw him, a human soldier lying on the ground in the midst of the destruction. His uniform was torn, his body battered, but he was still alive. Myra didn't hesitate. She lowered the shuttle to the ground, and the doors opened with a hiss. The soldier, barely conscious, looked up at her, confusion in his eyes. "Come on," Myra said, her voice firm. "We're getting you out of here." She reached down to pull him up, her hands steady despite the danger surrounding them. The soldier's eyes widened in shock, but he didn't protest. She was his only chance at survival. As Myra helped him into the shuttle, the Zorathians closed in. There was no time to waste. She ordered the shuttle to take off, the roar of the engines deafening as they shot into the sky. The moment they were airborne, Myra glanced at the soldier. He was still disoriented, but his eyes locked onto hers. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, gratitude perhaps, but also curiosity. Myra had saved his life, and he knew it. As they flew back to the ship, Myra's thoughts raced. She had just made an unexpected choice. The Aloxians had long been at odds with humanity, but in this moment, Myra had chosen to save a human soldier. The decision would have consequences, both on the battlefield and among her crew. Would they understand? Could she convince them that this was the right choice? The shuttle docked with the flagship, and Myra helped the soldier out. She was greeted by her crew, who had been watching the entire rescue unfold. Lieutenant Herc was the first to speak. "Captain, we're glad you made it back safely, but—" "This soldier." Myra raised a hand, silencing him. "He's one of us now," she said, her voice firm. "We'll treat him as such." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Myra was resolute. She knew that her decision would be questioned, but she wasn't backing down. There was something about this human soldier that intrigued her, something more than just gratitude. Myra felt a strange pull toward him, a connection that she couldn't explain. The soldier, still struggling to stand, finally spoke. His voice was hoarse but clear. "Thank you," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "You saved my life." Myra nodded. "It's what I do." But even as she said the words, Myra felt the weight of her actions settle over her. Saving this human soldier was more than just an act of compassion. It was a decision that would change everything. For the first time in her life, Myra wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she was determined to see it through. Myra sat in her command chair, her hands gripping the armrests as she stared out into the vast emptiness of space. The battle had been won, but the consequences of her decision lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. She had saved a human soldier, Jack, and brought him aboard her flagship. The crew had followed her orders, but their eyes told a different story. They were confused, suspicious, and many of them were questioning her leadership. Myra knew this wouldn't be easy. She was their captain, but she wasn't immune to their doubts. Jack had been placed in the medbay, his wounds tended to by the ship's medical officers. He was recovering, but slowly. Myra couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility for him. She had saved him, yes, but the bond between them went deeper than that. Something about the way his eyes looked at her, filled with both gratitude and confusion, unsettled her. She had made a choice, but now she was unsure if it was the right one. As the ship moved through space, Myra's thoughts were interrupted by a chime from her comm system. She leaned forward, pressing the button to answer. "Captain, we need to talk." Lieutenant Herrick's voice came through, firm and respectful. Myra sighed. She had been expecting this. "Come to the command center," she replied, her voice steady. Moments later, Herrick entered, his expression serious. He stood tall, his uniform crisp, but his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. He had always been one of her most trusted officers, but this situation had him uneasy. "You've been too quiet, Captain," Herrick said, standing before her. "About the human. You didn't consult any of us before saving him. Some of the crew are questioning your judgment." Myra took a deep breath. "I made a decision, Herrick. He was dying out there. I couldn't just leave him." "I understand," Herrick said, "but you have to see it from their perspective. The Aloxians and humans, we've been enemies for centuries. Bringing him aboard wasn't just a simple act of kindness. It's a risk." Myra looked at him, her eyes sharp. "I didn't make this decision lightly. I believe in the future of the galaxy, Herrick. If we keep fighting, if we keep dividing ourselves, there won't be a future. I can't stand by and watch innocent lives, human or Aloxian, be lost in pointless conflict. I want to believe that we can find a way to coexist." Herrick's gaze softened, but there was still doubt in his eyes. "And what about your people, Captain? What about your crew?" "They'll understand in time," Myra said quietly. "I'm doing what I believe is right, and I expect them to follow." Herrick nodded, though the tension was still there. "Understood, Captain, but be careful. The crew is watching you." As Herrick left the command center, Myra remained seated, her thoughts heavy. She wasn't sure if her crew would ever fully understand her decision, but she had to hope they would come around. More than that, she had to believe that saving Jack wasn't just an act of mercy. It was the beginning of something greater. A few days passed, and Jack's condition improved. He was still weak, but the medbay's advanced technology had worked wonders. He spent most of his time in a small room near the back of the ship, under constant supervision. Myra had made it clear to her officers that no one was to harm him, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. The crew kept their distance, and Jack felt the weight of their stares whenever he left his quarters. One afternoon, as Jack sat in his room looking out at the stars, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Myra. He wasn't surprised. He had been expecting her. "Captain," he said, his voice still rough but sincere, "thank you for everything." "You didn't have to save me, but you did." Myra entered, standing tall, her posture strong. "I didn't do it for gratitude, Jack. I did it because I had to. I couldn't let you die out there. No one should die alone in a battle like that." Jack looked up at her, his eyes searching hers. "I don't understand. I'm a human. We've been at war for so long. Why did you save me?" Myra paused for a moment, considering her answer. "Because I believe there is more to life than war, Jack. More than fighting, more than hatred. I've seen enough destruction in my lifetime to last 100 lifetimes, and I don't want to be part of that anymore. I believe that the future of the galaxy is in our hands. Not the hands of our enemies, not the hands of the old ways, our hands. Jack was silent for a long moment. The weight of her words settled into him. Myra's voice wasn't filled with anger or hatred. It was filled with hope, a hope that he wasn't sure he had ever known. "I don't know what to say," he finally said. "I've been trained to fight, to kill, to hate people like you, but now, I don't know anymore." Myra walked closer, her eyes locking onto his. "It's okay to be uncertain, Jack. I was uncertain once, but sometimes we have to make a choice to be better than the past, a choice to do something different. I've made that choice, and I hope in time you'll make it too." Jack nodded slowly, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I'll try," he said quietly. Myra reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That's all anyone can do, just try." For a moment they stood in silence, the hum of the ship the only sound between them. Then Myra turned to leave. "Captain," Jack called softly, his voice uncertain. "What happens now?" Myra looked back at him, her expression firm but kind. "Now we move forward together." Later that day, Myra gathered her senior officers in the command center to discuss the next steps. The war with the Zorathians was far from over, and they needed a strategy to move forward. But as she stood at the head of the table, her thoughts kept drifting back to Jack. She had made a promise to him, but her crew, they still didn't fully understand, and she knew it would take time to change their minds. "We need to focus on the Zorathians," Herc said, breaking the silence. "We can't afford to split our attention. Our mission is to end this war, and that must remain our priority." Myra nodded, but her gaze never left Herc. "I agree, but I also believe we need to start thinking about the bigger picture. After the war, when we win, we need to rebuild. We need to be prepared for a new future." "Captain, are you saying we should make peace with the humans?" Lieutenant Nares asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Myra's eyes hardened. "I'm saying we need to be open to the possibility. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." There was a long silence as the officers exchanged looks. Myra knew that not all of them agreed with her, but she also knew that she couldn't back down. The galaxy had to change, and it had to start with her. As the days passed, Myra's bond with Jack grew stronger. The more she worked with him, the more she saw in him. His intelligence, his resilience, his willingness to learn. He was a soldier, yes, but he was also a man caught in a situation much larger than himself. And despite everything he had been taught, he was willing to listen, to change. That, Myra realized, was the most important thing of all. One evening, after another tense meeting with her crew, Myra went to check on Jack. She found him in the small training room trying to spar with a practice dummy. His movements were slow and he looked exhausted, but there was determination in his eyes. "Need a hand?" Myra asked, leaning against the doorframe. Jack looked up, surprised. "I'm not much of a fighter, but I've got to try. I need to prove myself." Myra stepped into the room, her gaze focused on him. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Jack. You've already done enough." He lowered his head, frustration clear on his face. "I don't feel like I have. I'm just trying to understand what this all means." Myra walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It means that you're part of something bigger now, something that could change everything, and that's enough. Just be yourself." "And that's more than enough." Jack met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose beyond survival. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a part of something greater. The days aboard the Aloxian flagship stretched into weeks, and with each passing day, the weight of Myra's decision to save Jack grew heavier. The war with the Zorathians was still raging, but the peace that Myra hoped for seemed further away than ever. Her crew, divided and suspicious, watched every interaction between her and Jack. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but the tension was becoming unbearable. The fragile trust she had fought so hard to build was beginning to crack. Myra couldn't escape the feeling that something was amiss. Every time she entered the command center, the eyes of her officers followed her, questioning, judging. They hadn't said it outright, but she could feel the whispers behind her back. There were murmurs about her decision to save Jack, murmurs that grew louder with each passing day. Some members of the crew saw her as weak for letting a human aboard, others as a traitor for questioning the centuries-old enmity between the Aloxians and humans. The most troubling part was that Myra wasn't sure where Jack stood anymore. He had seemed so eager to be part of the Aloxian cause at first, grateful for her saving him. But as time went on, he grew distant. He spent long hours in the ship's small training room, practicing his combat skills in silence. His gaze seemed distant, as if he was searching for something he couldn't find. One afternoon, Myra entered the training room to check on Jack. She had been hoping that their bond would continue to grow, that she could help him understand the cause they were fighting for. But when she found him that day, her heart sank. He was standing before a mirror, his fists clenched, staring at his reflection. His face was set in a hard expression, and his posture was tense, as though he were preparing for something far more dangerous than a simple sparring session. "Jack!" Myra's voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a blade. "What's going on?" Jack turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. There was a hardness in his gaze now, one that she hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice flat, "about what you said, about what you believe." Myra crossed the room to stand before him, her brow furrowed in concern. "You've been training a lot. Are you trying to prove something to yourself?" Jack shook his head, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "No, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to figure out where I belong." Myra's heart sank at the words. "You belong here," she said quietly. "We're in this together, Jack. We're both fighting for something bigger than ourselves." Jack met her gaze, his eyes darkening with doubt. "But what if I'm not meant to fight this war? What if I don't belong here? I was trained to fight for my people, for Earth, but now everything is different." Myra took a deep breath, stepping closer to him. "I understand this isn't easy for either of us, but you don't have to fight this battle alone. I'm here. We're in this together, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we all survive." Jack's expression softened for a moment, but it quickly hardened again. "I don't know anymore, Myra. I don't know if I can keep fighting for a cause I don't believe in." The words hit Myra like a punch to the chest. She had never expected this, never expected Jack to question everything they had fought for. But then again, maybe she had been naive to think that he would be able to accept the bond between them so easily. "I don't want you to fight for something you don't believe in," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I do want you to understand why I'm doing this. Why I believe in this cause. I believe that our future is together, Jack, the Aloxians and the humans. We can't keep fighting forever. The galaxy deserves better." Jack looked away, his eyes narrowing. "I used to believe in that. I used to believe we could change things, but now everything's so complicated." Myra didn't know what to say. She wanted to reach out to him, to make him understand, but the words caught in her throat. She had spent her life fighting for a cause, and now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if that cause was enough to hold everything together. She had made a choice when she saved Jack, but now she was beginning to wonder if that choice had been the right one. As Jack turned away from her, Myra's thoughts turned inward. Was she wrong? Had she been too hasty in believing that humans and Aloxians could work together? Was it even possible for them to coexist, given the long history of mistrust and hatred between their people? She had always believed in the possibility of peace, but now the weight of her doubts threatened to crush her. That evening, after Jack had retreated to his quarters, Myra gathered her senior officers in the command center for a meeting. The mood was tense, and the air was thick with unspoken questions. Myra's crew was growing more divided by the day, and she knew she needed to address it before it got out of hand. "I've noticed the tensions among the crew," Myra began, her voice firm. "I understand why some of you are uncomfortable with the decision to save Jack. I know that he is human, and I know that many of you are still uncertain about our relationship with the humans, but I need you to understand something. This war isn't just about defeating the Zorathians. It's about finding a way to end the cycle of hatred and violence. It's about building something new." Lieutenant Herc spoke up, his voice laced with doubt. "Captain, we've fought the humans for centuries. We can't just throw that away. How can you expect us to trust someone who's been trained to kill us?" Myra's eyes narrowed. She had anticipated this question. "I understand your concerns, Herc, but I'm asking you to look beyond the history, beyond the battles we've fought. Look at the bigger picture. If we keep fighting this war, if we keep clinging to the past, we'll never have a future. And that future is worth fighting for." There was a long silence in the room as the officers exchanged looks. Myra could feel the weight of their skepticism pressing down on her. She knew that not all of them were ready to accept her vision of a united future, but she had to believe that they would come around eventually. "I'm not asking you to forget the past," she continued. "I'm asking you to look ahead, to see the possibilities. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." Finally, Herc spoke again, his voice softer this time. I understand, Captain, but it's going to take time for the crew to come to terms with this. There are those who still see Jack as a threat. I know, Myra said. But we'll deal with that together. We have to stay strong. We have to show the crew that we can move past this, that we can work together no matter what. The meeting ended with a sense of unease still hanging in the air, but Myra felt a glimmer of hope. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make this work. The future of the galaxy was at stake, and she wasn't about to let her crew, or herself, back down now. Later that night, as Myra walked through the ship's corridors, she found herself lost in thought. The weight of the decisions she had made pressed down on her, but she knew there was no turning back now. She had chosen her path, and now it was time to see it through. When she reached her quarters, she was surprised to find Jack waiting for her. His expression was still hard, but there was something else in his eyes now, something that she hadn't seen before. Myra, Jack said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. I've been thinking. Myra raised an eyebrow. About what? About us, Jack said. About everything. Myra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. And, I don't know if I can be part of this, Jack admitted. I don't know if I can keep fighting for something I'm not sure I believe in. Myra took a deep breath. You don't have to do this alone, Jack. You don't have to fight for something you don't believe in. But I hope in time you'll believe in this, in what we're trying to do here. Jack's gaze softened. I want to believe in it, Myra, I really do, but right now I'm not sure how. Myra placed a hand on his shoulder, looking him in the eyes. Then we'll figure it out together. And for the first time in weeks, Jack's expression softened. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He wasn't alone anymore. The hum of the Aloxian flagship filled the command center as Myra stood before the large holographic display, eyes focused on the swirling map of the galaxy. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one weighing heavily on her. The Zorathians had not relented in their assault, and every battle seemed to be dragging them closer to a breaking point. But there was something else weighing on her, a constant pull, a sense of uncertainty that had taken root deep in her chest. The bond she had formed with Jack, the human soldier she had saved, was both a source of strength and doubt. The crew was still divided. While some had come to respect her decision, there were others who had yet to accept a human being on board their ship. It wasn't just about the war anymore. It was about something much bigger. The question of whether they could truly work together, humans and Aloxians, after all the hatred, all the bloodshed, lingered in the air like a silent storm. Myra had hoped that their actions would speak louder than words, but the tension among her crew was still palpable. A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from Jack. Captain, the message began, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I know I haven't been the easiest person to understand. I've been confused, unsure of where I stand, but I want to help. I want to make things right. Myra closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She knew this wasn't easy for him. His world had been turned upside down. He had been trained to fight, to hate, and now he was part of something entirely different. But Myra believed in him. She believed that, despite everything, Jack could help bring about the change they so desperately needed. With a deep breath, Myra stood up from her desk and made her way to the medbay, where Jack had been recovering from his injuries. The doors slid open, and she saw him sitting on a medical bed, staring out the small window at the vast emptiness of space. He didn't turn as she approached, but she could feel his presence in the room, heavy with unsaid words. You wanted to talk? Myra asked, her voice soft. Jack turned to face her, his expression serious but not distant. Yeah, I've been thinking about our mission, about why we're doing this. Myra sat down beside him, careful not to crowd him. And I think I've finally figured it out, Jack said, his voice steady. It's not just about the Zorathians. It's not just about the fight. It's about something bigger. About us, about you and me and what we represent. You're right. We can't keep fighting forever. I want to be part of this. I want to help. Myra smiled slightly, feeling a surge of relief. You're not alone in this, Jack. I believe in this cause, but it's not just my fight. It's all of ours, the future of the galaxy. It depends on all of us working together. Jack nodded, his eyes filled with determination. Then let's make it count. The days following their conversation were filled with preparations for the final push against the Zorathians. The war was nearing its breaking point. Myra and her crew were about to face one of their most dangerous missions yet. Intelligence reports confirmed that the Zorathian fleet was preparing to launch a devastating attack on the Aloxian homeworld. If they didn't stop it, the Aloxians would be facing extinction. Myra stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. The Aloxian fleet was gathered, ready for battle. But this battle would be different. It wasn't just about victory, it was about proving to the galaxy that cooperation, unity, and peace were possible. They couldn't afford to lose. Captain, Herc's voice broke through her thoughts. The fleet is ready for your orders. Myra turned to him, her expression firm. We have one chance to end this. We need to strike first before they can launch their attack. We can't afford to wait. Herc nodded, but there was a tension in his eyes. He had always been loyal, but the stakes of this mission were higher than anything they had faced before. And what about the human soldier? Myra's gaze softened. Jack is part of this crew now. We fight together or we don't fight at all. Herc hesitated, then nodded. Understood, Captain. Myra turned back to the view of space, her mind racing. They had come so far, but the road ahead was uncertain. There would be sacrifices, there would be losses. But she couldn't afford to back down. Not now, not when the future was within reach. The battle began at dawn. The Aloxian fleet, led by Myra's flagship, moved in on the Zorathian fleet, which was positioned above the Aloxian homeworld. The two forces collided in a deafening roar of gunfire and explosions. Myra's ship weaved through the chaos, giving orders with precision, coordinating the assault on the Zorathian ships. It was a battle like no other, fast, brutal, and unforgiving. On the ground, Jack was part of the elite team sent to infiltrate the Zorathian flagship. He had trained for moments like this, but this time it was different. He wasn't fighting for Earth anymore. He wasn't fighting for the humans. He was fighting for something bigger, something that could change the course of history. As the team stormed the Zorathian flagship, Jack moved with the precision of a soldier. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. He knew his mission: disable the Zorathian weapons systems and buy Myra's fleet enough time to finish the battle. The corridors of the Zorathian ship were dark, with flickering lights casting long shadows across the walls. Jack's team moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. They had to be quick, time was running out. "This is it," Jack whispered to his team. "We take them out now or we don't get another chance." They moved deeper into the ship, taking down Zorathian soldiers with swift, efficient strikes. Jack felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins, but his thoughts were still clear. He knew what he had to do. They reached the control room where the Zorathian leader awaited. The door hissed open and Jack's team rushed in. The battle was fierce. The Zorathian leader fought with unmatched fury, but Jack's team was determined. In the end, it was Jack who struck the final blow, taking down the leader and securing control of the ship's weapon systems. With the Zorathian flagship disabled, the rest of the fleet fell quickly. The Aloxians were victorious, but the victory came at a heavy cost. As the battle drew to a close, Myra's flagship was severely damaged and many lives were lost. But they had won. The Zorathians had been defeated. Back aboard the flagship, the crew gathered in the aftermath of the battle. There was no celebration, only the somber silence of those who had given everything for the victory. Myra stood at the front of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of her crew. They had lost good men and women, but they had won the war. They had proven that cooperation was possible, and for the first time in a long while, Myra felt a sense of hope. Jack stood beside her, his face weary but proud. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Myra nodded, her eyes focused ahead. "We did, together." As the crew began to file out of the room, Myra and Jack remained behind, standing in silence. They had come so far and the road ahead was still uncertain. But in this moment they had won, and that was enough. "We've only just begun," Myra said softly, her gaze meeting Jack's. Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with a sense of understanding. "I know." And for the first time, Myra truly believed that the future was theirs to shape, together.